Donald Trump used his first major speech since leaving office yesterday to take aim at the Republicans who'd spoken out against him and stopped just short of announcing he'll run for the presidency again in 2024.
A Republican president will make a triumphant return to the White House, and I wonder who that will be. Who will that be? I wonder.
He made the comments at the Conservative Political Action Conference in Orlando. So could Trump make a comeback? I'm joined now by US expert and the Bondi Partners National Security Advisor, Mark Watson. Mark, thanks so much for your time. What did you make of the Trump speech? It went for a fair while, an hour and 20 minutes.
Very interesting. The CPAC is essentially a gathering of the right wing of the Republican Party. It doesn't necessarily represent the whole of the party. So it's no surprise that the former president got such a warm reception. He tossed them the sort of throwaway lines that they wanted to hear, that the election had been rigged. He suggested, but didn't confirm, he may run again in 2024, in his words, to beat the Democrats for a third time. So Donald Trump is not going away. He's going to be a thorn in the side of the Republican Party for years to come.
And it's a challenge because Annalise Nielsen, our reporter there, told us about this straw poll they did, and 7 in 10 wanted Trump to run again. 7 in 10 is still not unanimous. I mean, this is a problem. If that is just the right wing of the party and they've got a splinter away from him, they need to, well, how do they resolve that? It's a divided party.
It is absolutely a divided party. And the interesting thing that I think I took away from that was, even on the right wing of the party, while Trumpism is very much alive, I think something like 95% of those present said that they wanted Trumpism to continue, a much smaller majority think that Trump himself should continue. If you spread that across the whole of the Republican Party, and if Donald Trump wants to stay in the game and put himself forward as a leader of a faction within the Republicans, then you would have to think that in the very near future we're going to see a schism within the Republican Party.
And so if that's the case, then for Joe Biden, what are the implications for the Democrats? He's obviously trying to move really fast on a range of issues. But for him, what are the implications for the Democrats? I think for Biden, most people would say he'll only serve one term, but if they can do it effectively, that seems like they're in a solid position.
Absolutely. This is manna from heaven for the Democrats, because Joe Biden accurately can portray themselves, the Democrats at present, as a party of unity, a party of leadership. They're putting in place the policies they said they would do. They've moved very quickly. So he really can present a unified front at present. We do have to remember that it's papering over some of the cracks in the Democratic Party as well, however. We saw recently the backlash from the progressive wing of the Democrats when the president basically soft-pedalled on Saudi Arabia. There was a release of a report that said that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia knew of, if not approved, the assassination of Afshan Khashoggi, a Saudi journalist. I think the progressives really wanted much firmer action taken against Saudi Arabia. The president erred on the side of realpolitik and diplomacy. Those sorts of cracks will continue over different policy issues.
On another sort of divide, this between Australia and the United States, we heard from John Kerry, the climate envoy for Joe Biden. He said in an address last week that Australia wasn't on the same page, probably stating the obvious, not on the same page as the Biden administration, but then again, they weren't on the same page when it comes to climate with the Trump administration either, with Donald Trump having withdrawn from Paris. What are the implications of this issue for the Morrison government in managing the US relationship?
Well, they're caught in between a rock and a hard place. The coalition government's had a very clear agenda on climate change, as in not having much of an agenda on climate change. It now has an administration in Washington that clearly does. How they square that circle is going to be difficult. The Prime Minister can't be seen to be snapping to attention simply because John Kerry says we're not on the same page. But on the other hand, there's an air of realism that needs to intrude here, that we will need to make some adjustments so that we aren't pushed further away from that new administration in Washington.
Yeah, that's one thing that the Prime Minister will want to ensure, that we are as close as possible to the Biden administration, to the United States. And there is this climate summit coming up in April. You'd expect the Prime Minister to do everything he can to either be there in person or, if it's a virtual summit, to be involved.
You would think so. I mean, there is definitely a conversation to be had. You would imagine the Prime Minister would take something to that conference. He wouldn't turn up empty-handed. I have no idea what that is at this time, but it would be unusual to go in person and not have something to offer to the convention.
Now, yesterday I spoke to the Foreign Minister, Marise Payne, on the China relationship, and I asked her what the strategy is in relation to China. I'll play that for our viewers and then get your thoughts. Have a look.
We have a very clear strategy about protecting Australia's national interests and in the context of that also protecting our national security. We have made clear our definite willingness to engage with Chinese counterparts and our mature expectation that that would be able to occur. It will be a matter for those officers in the Chinese system as to whether they wish to have those conversations. But importantly, in trade terms, we can be absolutely clear about Australia's position in support of open markets, in support of the usual rules of international trade and the World Trade Organisation. Where there have been issues, we have taken them up respectfully and appropriately with Chinese authorities, including in a number of commodities, as you've suggested, where we've been unable to determine an outcome with those Chinese authorities, such as in the case of barley. We have taken those matters in an official sense to the World Trade Organisation processes.
The Foreign Minister there yesterday on Sky News says that there is a strategy in our to defend our national interest, but I did put to her the fact that, you know, Canada via its coal, New Zealand via its lobsters, filling the gap left by our exports that have been blocked.
Yeah, I'm afraid that even within a tight alliance grouping like the Five Eyes, when it comes to trade and domestic interest of farmers and producers, there will always be a lot of our nation first philosophy in that. Everyone accepts that. It would be nice to be able to maybe harmonise a little more in times of crisis, but the reality is on trade, each country will go its own path.
What's happening with the PNG stories? Because we're seeing various things about a fisheries project, about a possible Chinese-backed city. Are you worried about any of that? Is that a concern?
Not so much about the specifics. I mean, the idea that China will build a $39 billion multifunction polis in the most remote part of PNG is scarcely credible, but the message it's sending to Australia is very concerning.